The Atlantic is a black sheet of glass. No moon, no mercy, just wind sharp as a blade scraping across steel decks. Beneath the surface, something moves, a shadow with teeth, a German U-boat. Silent, hunting. Then ping. Sonar cuts through the darkness like a heartbeat skipping in a dying chest. On the bridge, young black sailors stand frozen in the salt air. Navy blues pressed. Eyes forward, breath steady. They were told they weren't built for this, told they were good for kitchens, for laundry rooms, for carrying trays. But tonight, they are tracking one of Adolf Hitler's deadliest weapons, and the ocean doesn't know what to expect. The war had already swallowed thousands of ships. U-boats ruled these waters like ghosts. They slipped beneath convoys, struck without warning, vanished before the screaming stopped. White officers once laughed at the idea of black men manning sonar. Too complicated, they said. Too technical, but here's the part no one tells you. These sailors memorized frequencies like musicians learn notes. They studied echo patterns in dim red rooms, headphones clamped tight, sweat running down their necks. They listened to the ocean breathe, and tonight it whispers back, ping, closer. One sailor tightens his grip. Another wipes salt from his eyes. Somewhere in the dark, a captain mutters, hold steady. Underwater, the U-boat commander believes he is untouchable. He has done this before, stalk, strike, disappear, but what he doesn't know, he is being hunted by men his world underestimated. Contact confirmed, a voice says, calm, controlled. And just like that, depth charges roll, heavy cylinders tumble off the stern, splash, then silence, a long breath, and then the ocean explodes, water erupts into towering columns of white fury. Shockwaves punch through the hull, the Atlantic roars like it has chosen a side. The sailors brace as the deck shudders beneath their boots. One whispers almost to himself, let that be enough. Seconds stretch, too long. Then oil rises to the surface, debris, wood, metal, the shadow beneath them is gone. A U-boat, one of Nazi Germany's most feared predators, has been shattered. And on this freezing deck, in the middle of a segregated navy that barely allowed them to carry weapons, a black unit has just helped send it to the bottom of the Atlantic. Impossible, unthinkable. Undeniable, but here's what history often forgets. When they returned to port, there were no parades. No headlines screaming their names, no medals pressed into trembling hands, just orders. Silence and the same old prejudice waiting on the dock. They had fought an enemy abroad and an enemy at home, yet something shifted that night, because every sonar ping after that carried proof. Proof that skill has no color, that courage doesn't segregate. The ocean had tested them, and they answered with thunder. So the next time you imagine the Battle of the Atlantic, America was at war. But not just abroad, not just across the Atlantic. At home, a quieter war raged, a war of color, of doors closed, of orders whispered and opportunities denied. Black Americans answered the call anyway. Pearl Harbor burned, and with it fear and fury. They raised their hands, signed the papers, volunteered. They believed in democracy. They believed in defeating fascism. They believed their country could be better than its own history. But the U.S. Navy? It believed in walls, in lines drawn on skin. In decades of rules, that said, you wear the uniform, but you don't wear respect. Mess attendants, laundry, serving tables, polishing shoes, making beds for men who might never even look at you. And yet the ocean didn't care about prejudice. German U-boats carved through the Atlantic like knives through fog. Ships vanished. Men drowned. Supplies disappeared into cold, black water. America needed sailors, skilled sailors, but the Navy had forgotten something vital. Courage does not have a color, skill does not come with skin attached. Quietly, the walls began to crack. A handful of black recruits slipped into specialized training. Communications, gunnery, anti-submarine warfare, orders frowned upon it. Some white officers whispered that it would fail, that it could never work. But here's the part history often skips over. Once you train a man to listen to the ocean, to read its hidden patterns, to strike what hides beneath, you can't pretend he doesn't belong on the battlefield. And so something began to stir, a quiet defiance, a methodical, deadly expertise, a group of sailors who knew the ocean better than the enemy expected. Because soon, the Atlantic itself would test them, and every rule the Navy had written about where they belonged would be drowned in the roar of depth charges. Every shadow beneath the waves would learn that courage recognizes no uniform, and skill respects no prejudice. The Navy was divided, but the sea would not be. And what happened next would force the world and America to look again. The rooms were small, too small, walls pressed in. The air tasted of salt, sweat, and electricity. Red lights hummed. Headphones clamped tight, fingers hovering over switches. Every ping mattered, every echo could be death. Was that a whale, a current, or something darker, steel moving beneath the hull? One mistake. 1 second of doubt. Torpedoes in the dark, men gone before anyone could blink. These were the new crews, integrated crews, among them black signalmen, gunners, sonar operators. Men who had been told their place was in the galley. Men who had been told they weren't cut out for this war. But here, their hands steered fate. Their calculations guided the fleet. Their nerves held steady when the Atlantic screamed. Night after night, convoys crawled across the Black Sea. Alarms shattered the silence. Depth charges thundered. Ships shuddered beneath the weight of war. And still, these sailors listened. They listened to echoes that others ignored. They followed patterns that the enemy thought invisible. And then contact confirmed. A hush falls over the bridge. The captain squints. Orders hang in the air. Would he trust them, the men who history said didn't belong here? They had trained in sweat and fear. They had endured the sneers, the doubt, the segregation that never left their uniforms. And now the Atlantic itself demanded proof. The destroyer dips and tilts. Sonar pings race across the deck. Hands move, calculations are whispered. A steel predator lurks beneath, thinking itself safe. But the men in these rooms, they know the ocean better than it knows itself. One signalman leans closer to his scope. He mutters almost to himself, "They can't hide from us." Minutes stretch. Hours feel like seconds. Then the crew reacts with precision. Depth charges fall. Explosions tear through the dark water. Ships shake. Men hold their breath. And when the chaos fades, the shadow beneath the waves has vanished. Not by luck, not by chance, by skill, by courage, by those the Navy once said could not belong. They proved the impossible. They carved a place where none was offered, and the Atlantic finally had no choice but to respect them. But even in victory, the world above remained slow to notice. Orders continued, segregation persisted, history hesitated. Yet beneath every sonar ping, the truth had already been written, and soon the ocean would demand it be heard. The ocean doesn't forgive mistakes, but neither does prejudice. Some officers still refuse to look at them as equals. Some sailors wouldn't share a bunk. Every decision questioned. Every call doubted. A false sonar contact. Whispers followed like shadows. A correct maneuver. Silence. They weren't just fighting U-boats. They were fighting expectation. Fighting the assumption that they would fail before they even tried. And then night fell heavy. Convoy running near Europe. Waves like knives. Wind screaming over steel. Sonar hummed. Red lights glowed. Headphones clamped tight. A ping, not debris, not a stray echo. Metal, solid, alive. A submarine, the destroyer escort pivoted. Depth charges armed. The decision rested on one man's call. A black sonar operator. If he was wrong, dozens of ships, hundreds of lives gone. If he was right, they could save the convoy, save the day. He swallowed. Fingers steady, breath held. "Hold steady," he whispered. The charges dropped. The ocean roared, water exploded, steel trembled, shockwaves rumbled through decks, men gripped rails, eyes wide. Hearts hammering, and then silence, oil slicks, debris, twisted metal rising to the surface. Proof unmistakable, cheers erupted, quiet, controlled, professional, a victory, hard won. Acknowledged only in nods and brief glances. But in that moment the ocean had no doubt. The men who were told they didn't belong had saved hundreds, had struck the enemy. Had proven themselves in ways words could never capture. The Atlantic was quiet now. Too quiet. Ships sailed on, battered but alive. Convoys survived. U-boats didn't return home. Victory had a sound, the slap of waves, the clatter of rigging, the distant hum of engines. And yet, who tracked those predators beneath the waves? Who loaded the guns, checked the signals, kept the ships alive in darkness? Not the papers, not the headlines, not the history books. Some of these men returned home with medals gleaming. Yet the sidewalks they walked were still divided. The buses they boarded still segregated. The schools, the neighborhoods, the lunch counters, walls that didn't crumble with victory at sea. They had faced Hitler's navy. They had stared into steel, torpedoes, death itself, and held steady. They had proven the impossible. But here's the cruel irony. A uniform that had conquered oceans couldn't conquer the prejudice on a city street. Hands that had saved lives could not reach the counters where they were refused. Some swallowed their anger, some carried it silently like a weight beneath their chest, and some whispered to themselves, "We fought for a world we may never see." Victory without recognition. Triumph without applause. And yet the ocean remembered, the men remembered, and the courage they carried, that courage could not be sunk. Every convoy they protected, every echo they tracked, every life they saved, it was proof. Proof that skill and valor cannot be denied, even if the world chooses to look away. And today, when a Navy ship sails the Atlantic, when a sonar hums beneath the waves, every green light, every measured ping, every life saved still carries their name. Night, cold. The Atlantic a black sheet of ice. Winter winds bite through uniforms. Rails are slick with frost. Supplies bound for the front, lives riding in every crate, every barrel. Intelligence warned, a wolf pack waits. Coordinated, hidden, deadly, no moon, no stars, just the ocean and its secrets. Ping, another ping, then another, not one submarine, multiple. Metal moving beneath them. Hunting, waiting, orders crack across the deck, engines roar, men shout, the destroyer escort braces, every bolt, every rivet quivering under tension. In the sonar room, the air is thick. Red lights hum, sweat drips despite the cold. Headphones clamp ears, fingers hover over switches, calculations whispered like prayers. A choice split-second, impossible. Pursue aggressively or protect the convoy formation. The wrong decision could mean hundreds dead. The right one could save them all. They pursue. Depth charges roll in sequence. Thunder under the waves, the ship shudders. Torpedoes scream past, missing by inches. Metal groans, lights flicker, heartbeats hammer. And then a massive underwater blast. The ocean convulses, silence follows, oil rises, debris floats, proof unmistakable, one U-boat destroyed, another crippled, the wolf pack scattered. The convoy survives, lives intact, mission complete, against doubt, against prejudice, against every hand that had said they didn't belong, against every expectation that failure was inevitable. The ocean had kept its secrets for centuries, but it could not deny what happened that night. They had faced steel, shadow, and silence, and they had won, but the world above still slow to see. Still slow to recognize, yet history does not lie forever. Every echo, every depth charge, every life saved still carries their name, even if the world forgot. The war ended. Ships returned to port. Guns fell silent. The Atlantic calmed, but the echoes of battle lingered in every hull, every deck, every heartbeat. Medals were handed out. Parades rolled through city streets. Bands played. Flags waved, but the world above the water moved slower than the victories at sea. And yet, something had changed, something no parade could fully capture. Black sailors had faced torpedoes, depth charges, and the ocean's darkest secrets. They had done what the Navy once said they could not. They had survived the wolf packs. They had saved lives. They had proven with skill, courage, and unshakable resolve that segregation was not only unjust, it was irrational. And here's the part no one always remembers. Just 3 years later, a pen stroke changed the future. President Harry S. Truman signed Executive Order 9981. The U.S. Armed Forces at last desegregated. It wasn't charity. It wasn't a favor. It was overdue recognition of reality. The ocean had forced it. The Atlantic had demanded it. The quiet revolution had begun, forged in sonar rooms on icy decks under the roar of depth charges. Men who were told they didn't belong had rewritten the rules. And today, every integrated Navy, every officer and sailor judged by skill rather than skin, carries the legacy of those who stared into the Atlantic and said, "We belong here." We always have. Even if history moved slowly, the truth had already sailed, but rarely do we see them. Young black sailors crouched in sonar rooms, headphones tight over their ears, eyes fixed on glowing dials, listening for the faintest whisper beneath the waves. A ping could mean life. A pause could mean death. They didn't just sink submarines. They shattered the rules of a system that said they didn't belong. The Navy's walls of prejudice met the Atlantic, and the ocean answered only to skill and courage. Every depth charge, every echo, every calculation, a rebellion in silence. They proved that valor has no color, that ability knows no prejudice. And maybe the real victory wasn't just against the U-boats. Maybe it was against the idea that some Americans were less worthy of defending their own country. History almost let their story sink beneath the waves. Medals and parades can fade. Names can be forgotten, but courage leaves a trace. Every sonar ping, every convoy saved, every life protected still carries it. Maybe it's time we bring their story back to the surface. Listen closely. The Atlantic never forgets.